introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I was in Sacramento being presented with this beautiful award from PCRM president, Dr. Neil Barnard. It's called the Voice of Compassion Award. And I met somebody there who seemed like a very interesting person. And I asked him if he'd like to be on the show. And he said yes. His name is Paul Shapiro. He's the author of Clean Meat, and he's going to discuss whether or not the future of meat is fungi. And he actually is a really fun guy. He told a lot of jokes. Please welcome him to the show. It's nice to see you back, Paul.
Chef AJ, what an honor to be on with you. I am a fan of yours, and if I'm a fun guy, you are a fun gal. So you're fun. So we got a lot of fungi and fun gals who are going to be chatting about today, I'm sure.
Well, I can't wait to, you have been on my radar, actually. I mean, I've heard about you because I figured, I think it was maybe from even Robert Cheek and what you did. And I find it extremely interesting as somebody who's been vegan almost 50 years, because I would like people not to eat really any meat because I don't want any animals to suffer. But before you get into what you're doing, maybe just tell us who you are and how you even became a plant eater in the first place.
Oh, Chef AJ, it's been a fun ride. So back in 1993, I was shown a videotape of what happens to animals on factory farms and in slaughter plants. It was like a VHS tape, this was no YouTube back then. And it was really shocking to me. And I remember thinking, if I wouldn't want my dogs treated like that, why would I want any animal to be treated like that? And so I became a vegetarian. And I was very young. I was only 13 years old, but I didn't know anything about vegan anything. In fact, the first time I saw the word, I was like, what is this vegan stuff? And I remember somebody telling me, oh, if you become one of these vegans, it's kind of like holding your breath. Like, you might be able to do it for a short amount of time, but eventually you'll give up or you'll die. And so I didn't do it at first, but then I started reading more and I met people who I learned they didn't call themselves vegans, they were vegans. And I learned that many of them have been doing it for quite some time, just like yourself. And I then learned that Carl Lewis, who was like the big athlete at that time, Carl was like the Usain Bolt or the Michael Phelps of our era, right? The number one Olympian. I worship this guy. And I read an interview with him in which he said that he, in fact, was vegan. And I was like blown away. I was like, wait a minute. Not only can you survive, but you can actually be the number one athlete, in my view, in the world. And so I decided that I'd become vegan. And more than 30 years later, I'm still doing it. I haven't died yet. And I've devoted the last 30 years of my life and my career to trying to help prevent cruelty to animals. And so I'm happy to chat about that, but that's the last 30 years or so in a very small nutshell for you there.
So it's been 30 years. That's amazing, because I remember it was a comment from a veterinarian who said, you love your dog so much. Why would you eat another animal? I'm like, well, that makes sense. I guess I'm vegan now. But it doesn't, Paul, it doesn't make sense to most people, though. They don't
No,
think like that.
yeah, look, it's obvious that the term, if slaughterhouses had glass walls, we'd all be vegetarian, is not true, right? Most people who see a slaughterhouse video or even go to a slaughterhouse or work in a slaughterhouse don't become vegetarian. The reality is that sadly, most people who see the suffering of animals do not stop eating them, and many people who do stop eating them revert and go back to eating them. So, I long ago gave up the notion that all we have to do is just raise awareness and that will be what is sufficient. I no longer believe that. I think we really need great alternatives in the marketplace that can help people crave what they're seeking to eat without having to harm animals in the process.
Nice, nice. So how did you get involved in the business that you're in?
Well, I spent about 20 years in the nonprofit animal advocacy world, primarily doing at first undercover investigations at slaughterhouses and factory farms, and then as a lobbyist, working to pass laws that would be good for animals and try to defeat bills that would be bad for animals. And after a long time doing this, I started worrying really that maybe food technology and food innovation were going to do more than what I was doing. And so, like, if you read about the history of, let's say, horses, right? For thousands of years, we whipped and beat horses in order to transport us around. And nobody stopped doing that because they cared about horses. They stopped because bikes and cars were invented, or what we originally called horseless carriages. And that was a revolution in how we transported ourselves that liberated horses from our exploitation of them. But again, not because of humane sentiment, not because of sustainability concerns, just because something was better. It was a better innovation that came along. And the same is so for so many other types of animal exploitation. For thousands of years, we harpooned whales in order to light our homes. We stopped only because kerosene was invented and it was a cheaper, cleaner way to light our homes. We live plucked geese for thousands of years to write letters. And nobody stopped because they cared about geese. They stopped because metal fountain pens were invented, and it was a much easier way to write than using a quill. And so the list of these examples goes on and on and on of areas where for thousands of years we had exploited animals. And then in a very short amount of time, usually 10 or 20 years, that exploitation was rendered obsolete by a new innovation. And around 2015 or 2016, I started wondering, might this also be true for chickens and pigs and cows and fish and so on? Might they be liberated not by humane sentiment or sustainability concerns, but by new technological innovations? And, was seeing the rise of many of these new alternative meat companies. And I was wondering, might they do more than what I was doing? And so I didn't think that I could contribute in that way. Like I didn't have a food science degree. I wasn't a chef. I wasn't a venture capitalist with millions of dollars. I didn't have an MBA from Harvard. Like I didn't know what I could do. So I thought, maybe I'll write a book on this topic. And I was pretty hubristic. I'd never written or published a book before, but I decided to do it. And the book ultimately did better than I ever dreamt. It was called Clean Meat: How Growing Meat Without Animals Will Revolutionize Dinner and the World. And it was published by Simon & Schuster, debuted on the Washington Post bestseller list. It was reviewed everywhere from NPR to Wall Street Journal. And I got just really lucky. Like, I mean, really, I was very lucky. And the book had a transformative effect in my life, and it opened up a lot of doors for me. And I had two choices. Either I could continue writing about these people who I thought were going to solve the problem that had animated my life for the past couple of decades, or I could just become one of them myself. And at that time, I decided I'm going to not write another book, at least right now, although I still would like to actually. But I thought I'm going to start a company. And so that's 6 years ago. I, with my co-founders, started a company called The Better Meat Co., which specializes in using fermentation to grow whole food, all natural, unprocessed, highly protein-packed alternatives to animal-based meat. And I'm eager to talk about that, but that's how I really got started, was writing about the people who were doing these companies. And I thought, these people aren't superheroes, right? They're just human. And if they can do it, maybe I could too. And that's why I decided to start this company. And we're based in Sacramento. We've got 24 employees, and we're working all the time to try to create a better way to recreate the meat experience without animals.
It's interesting how you pointed out that throughout human history, when we stopped using animals, it wasn't because we had compassion or it was the right thing to do. It was because something better and cheaper came along.
Yeah, I wish that we were different than we are. I wish that compassion and sentiment for appeals to humane treatment were more effective than they have been. But animal advocates, including myself, have been trying to make those arguments for decades, and meat demand has only gone up. Since the time that I became vegan over 30 years ago, per capita meat demand has skyrocketed, both in the United States, in China, in India, in Brazil, and Mexico. All the places going to matter the most in the future, meat demand is going up, not down. And so, those of us who live in the plant-based bubble, and I consider myself one of them, frankly, we think that everything is really moving in the right direction. We hear all these great stories. We meet people who have gone plant-based and so on. But the number of animals who are raised for food continues inexorably rising. We raise more animals for food today than we did yesterday. And in fact, we raise more animals for food today than ever before in human history. And so something has to happen. I wish I'd be overjoyed if people would just, be happy to eat bean and rice burritos, lentil soup, hummus wraps. I eat that type of way most of the time myself. But people seem to really want meat. And so while there's a lot of people who are happy to eat bean and rice burritos, again, including myself, there's a lot of people who want meat. And I think that just in the same way that there's a lot of people who want to drive, it'd be better if we all biked or walked around, but a lot of people want to drive. So we got to create cars that don't rely on fossil fuels. Well, similarly, we need to create a better way to satiate humanity's meat tooth, so to speak. And I, for one, believe that microbial fungi fermentation is really among the most promising ways to do this in a way that is healthy, that is sustainable, that is animal welfare friendly, and most importantly, is delicious.
Yeah. How did you, is this technology that existed? Did you figure it out? Because I had never heard of it until I heard of you.
There's really one company on the planet that for decades has been doing this. It's called Corn, Quorn. It's based in Britain, and it's way more popular in Europe than it is the United States. You can buy it here, but mostly it's in Western Europe. And what they figured out decades ago was that they figured out that there's this one species of microbial fungi. We're not talking about mushrooms here. We're talking about microbes that you can grow and that can be highly protein packed. Now, mushrooms have been used for centuries as a meat replacement in Asian cuisine. But we have to remember, one, mushrooms don't perfectly mimic meat in their taste and texture. And two, they also have very little protein. And so as a result, the question is, are there whole non-animal foods that can be really packed with protein? And now, you and I know, Chef AJ, that protein deficiency is not a common problem, right? In the Western world. At the same time, many people want that satiating effect that protein offers. And so the question is, can you get that without having to use animals? And in the case of microbial fungi, you can actually get extremely proteinaceous foods that oftentimes have a meat-like texture in their whole food all natural state. And so I'll give you an example. Think about right now how we make plant-based meat today. Take Beyond Meat as an example. You got to grow a field of peas, harvest a field of peas, mill it into a flour, but that flour is very low in protein, maybe like 20% protein by dry weight. And so you've got to strip out the fiber, strip out the fat, concentrate it down into a protein powder that like an isolated pea protein powder that an athlete might take as a supplement. And then it's protein packed, but it still doesn't have the texture of animal meat. So you got to subject it to something that's called extrusion, which is a fancy way of saying lots of pressure, lots of heat. And that creates the hero ingredient, so to speak, of texturized pea protein that then you add a dozen or so other ingredients to it and you get the Beyond Burger. Now, I like the Beyond Burger, but you can see why it's a lot more expensive than animal-based meat, because even though peas are cheaper than beef, it's not made from peas. It's made from a tiny portion of the pea. And then that has had many processes that are expensive subjected to. And then you got to add these other ingredients. So what if you could make alternative meats that didn't involve isolation, fractionation, extrusion, lots of other ingredients, but instead you could do it in almost like a single ingredient, whole food, all natural state. And that's what microbial fungi can do. Now, corn, Quorn, has been doing this, as I mentioned, for decades, but they only use one microorganism. And that's great. They have a company, they sell hundreds of millions of dollars of product a year. It's very successful, but it's all based on one organism. Now imagine if, their only plant protein company used one organism. Let's say they only use peas. So there's no soy, no wheat, no chickpea, no fava bean, no lentil, right? They're all just based on peas. Well, that would be ignoring a huge part of the plant kingdom that can make really delicious, highly proteinaceous foods, right? Well, similarly, in microbial fungi, there's thousands of species out there that you can make use of. And what we at the Better Meat Co. are doing is using a different strain and a different process to create what we view as a more meat-like product. And on its own, what we call rise up mycoprotein that we grow here in Sacramento via fermentation on its own, straight out of the fermenter. It has more protein than eggs and a complete protein, meaning all of the essential amino acids. It's got more iron and zinc than beef, more fiber than oats, more potassium than bananas. It is a true superfood. You get all the things about meat that people want, right? The satiating effect, the protein, the iron, the zinc, but you don't get the things that you don't want from meat: saturated fat, cholesterol, animal cruelty, environmental degradation, and more. And so this is a way to really get your meat and eat it too. And I'll show you, Chef AJ, you can see what it looks like here. I'm going to show you this is a mycoprotein steak made at the Better Meat Co. So the primary ingredient here, which is by far the overwhelming majority of the product, is simply mycelium, or the root-like structure of fungi that is grown here in Sacramento. And from the time that we inoculate our fermenter to the time that we harvest our fermenter is less than one single day. Now think about that. You have to feed a cow for more than a year before you get a steak. You have to feed a pig for 5 months before you get pork chops. You have to feed a chicken for 45 days before you get nuggets. In this case, we inoculate and we harvest in less than one single day. That is how you get to extraordinary efficiencies, minimal land use, minimal water use compared to raising animals for food. And I'll show you, you can see here, I wish that you could taste this, Chef AJ. I wish that you were here, but you can see here when you put your fork into it, I mean, this is really, truly like this very meat-like experience. And when you chew on it, I'll tell you, it is delectable.
Oh my God. But okay, so this product isn't for me because I didn't like meat when I ate it, but it does look exactly like I mean, it's mind blowing. Have you ever tried to fool people, and have you fooled people that eat meat? And what have they thought?
I'll tell you who I fooled. My dog, Eddie, who absolutely despises anything plant-based. He won't eat Beyond Burgers. He won't eat Gardein. He won't eat Morningstar. He won't eat any vegetables at all, ever. Yet, when I put this in front of him, he devours it. And I don't have to tell him that it's made from microbial fungi. I don't have to tell him it's mycoprotein. He just smells it, chews it, loves it. If I put other plant-based meats in front of him, generally speaking, he will not eat them. So this is on menus in Sacramento restaurants. And the goal for us is to scale up. What we have here in Sacramento, Chef AJ, is a wonderful demonstration scale plant that shows that our technology works. We can grow this mycoprotein efficiently and cost effectively. We have been granted numerous patents on our process, but we need to produce a lot more. We need to raise the capital that'll be necessary to produce a factory that can produce millions of pounds of this a year, rather than what we currently do, which is thousands of pounds. So our goal right now is to raise the capital necessary to build a full-scale commercial fermentation factory where we can churn out a river of our mycoprotein to flow through the food industry and create the next generation of alternative meats that will be healthier, the most sustainable protein, delicious, and really nutritious. And I'll show you here. It's so good. You look at this. I'm going to try to get this in the camera so you can really see exactly what it looks like. Keep in mind, this is primarily a whole food that is straight from the fermenter. Some people, they like farm to fork dining. Forget about that. This is fermenter to fork dining, where you can grow right here in controlled indoor agriculture some of the most sustainable, delicious protein on the planet.
So when in general, when people eat meat, they eat it in a variety of ways, rare, medium, well done. So can that be done the same way with the product you just showed?
Absolutely. You can cook it however you like. And my teammates who cooked it in a way that they know that I like it, which is grilled. And but you can make it however you want. You want it to be rarer on the interior, you can do that too. Our goal, though, necessarily is not simply meat mimicry. We want to make something that's delicious, that people love eating, that's nutritious, and that can prevent the need to use all these animals for food. And so if you think about like a metal fountain pen, it's not a mimicry of a quill pen, right? It's better than a quill pen. Like a metal fountain pen, you don't have to stop and dip it into the inkwell. You don't need to constantly sharpen the tip. It's better. When what displaced horses is not a mechanical horse that ran faster. It's not like they mimicked a horse, right? They made something way better than a horse. In our case, while this is very much like animal meat, our goal is not necessarily perfect meat mimicry. It is something better. You want to enjoy the meat experience. Like a metal fountain pen allows you to keep writing, but in a far more efficient way. Cars enable us to still transport ourselves, but in a more efficient way. Similarly, we want to have a way to produce a meat-like experience, but in a far more efficient way. And if we can get to a place where this can be actually cheaper than animal meat, that's when I think you're going to see real adoption in the market of these types of alternatives.
Why, Paul, do you think meat consumption has increased both in the US and outside of the US?
Well, I think it's pretty simple. There's a lot of factors in anything that happens over a long period of time. But in short, generally speaking, people eat about as much meat as they can afford. The price of meat has come down. And many people have escaped poverty in the world, which is great. Of course, we want people escaping poverty. Yet there's a side effect to escaping poverty, which is that people generally eat more meat and have a much heavier environmental footprint. And so in the last few decades, you've had hundreds of millions of people in India and China and other developing countries who have escaped poverty and joined the middle class. Now, of course, this is exactly what we want, right? You don't want all these people suffering and languishing in poverty. But again, there is the side effect, which is a much heavier footprint on the planet. And so this is the primary reason why meat demand has skyrocketed, is because people have been able to afford more meat. In the past, meat was considered the food for aristocrats, right? Like the poor subsisted on rice and beans in Latin America or rice and vegetables in Asia. It's not like they were vegetarian, but they didn't eat that much meat at all. It was more like a treat or a garnish or a side dish. Whereas today, meat is the center of the plate for a lot of people 2 or 3 times a day. And that means that billions and billions and billions of animals are subjected to the torment of factory farms and slaughterhouses. I remember when I first became vegan, reading animal welfare literature where they were saying that 6 billion animals went through American slaughterhouses every single year. And, today it's 10 billion. So, it's very sobering to realize that, and that people generally will eat about as much meat as they can afford.
It, it's mind-blowing, and I don't understand why everyone doesn't want to do this. Let me give you a few questions that I'm seeing from some of the live viewers on different platforms. So Billy, hi Billy, nice to see you here, wants to know, like, what's the oil content? Like what is it made of? So people that are interested in the nutritional parameters, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks so much, Billy. Great to hear from you. In short, the mycoprotein that we grow has nearly no fat. It's basically a bundle of protein and fiber. And so the user can essentially add whatever oil they want to. You want to add avocado oil or something else, you can do that to mimic whatever product you're seeking. So for example, if we're making taco meat with it, you don't really need to add much oil at all. If you're making a steak, which is a little bit more fatty, you want to add some oil. That's, what you would do. But the actual mycoprotein itself is very little oil, very little. It's primarily about, like if you look at the component of, it's basically just protein and fiber packaged together.
That's interesting. Well, Julie's saying this is incredible. It's noble work. And Sonia says, well, how do we try it? So if I understand you, it's only available right now at some restaurants in Sacramento.
Right now, that is true. But we're working on scaling up. We want to make it happen. And we are going to raise the capital necessary. So if people want to own a piece of this company, we'd love to hear from you. Our website is bettermeat.co. Again, that's bettermeat.co. But this is, we've proven that this technology works, that we can make this delicious food of the future. But we don't want it to be the food of the future. We want it to be the food of the present. And that's why it's going to take some capital in order to build the commercial fermentation facility that we need. Right now, we're running a 3-story tall fermenter. We really need something that's more like 10 or 15 stories, honestly, in order to produce at the scale in which we would be necessary to supply millions of pounds to restaurants around the country.
Somebody's asking, how much protein is in each serving?
Well, on a dry weight basis, it's about 50% protein. Now, of course, most people don't think about food in that way, but just as an example, I have been making what I call myco oatmeal or mycoatmeal with it, where you don't use oats, but you just use the mycoprotein as your base, and you hydrate it like you would overnight oats, although it hydrates much, much faster. And if you put cinnamon and vanilla in there, like, it really doesn't taste that different from oatmeal. But oats, generally speaking, have about 11 to 15% protein by dry weight, whereas this is like 50%. And so it's a huge amount of protein compared to what you would make oatmeal from. And even, beans, which are maybe like 15 to 20% protein, it's still much, much more than that. And so if you ate this whole steak, which is like 4 ounces, you're probably going to be getting likely around 20 grams of protein or so for that. But it depends on how you make the application, what other ingredients you might desire to add, and so on. But it's extraordinarily protein packed. And again, it has all of the essential amino acids, meaning it's what's generally referred to as a complete protein.
I love that, my coat meal. So people are asking, have you ever thought about going on Shark Tank?
I love Shark Tank. It's a fun show to watch. I think that our company is a little later stage than that. Most of those companies are much earlier. We are 6 years old. We already, have dozens of people working here. So I think it's a little bit late for us to do that. And, the type of capital that they're investing there is hundreds of thousands, whereas, we're really looking for tens of millions, honestly. But I love Shark Tank, and it's fun to watch.
Nice. So Crazy Farm Girl says, is the texture more like meat or mushroom, or is it something completely different?
Crazy Farm Girl, what a cool name. It is definitely not a texture like mushroom, because it isn't mushroom. It is microbial fungi. In fact, I'll do a little fun fact here for you. Oftentimes people think of fungi and mushrooms as synonyms. That is not the case, though. Mushrooms are one component of the fungi kingdom, but 90% of species in the fungi kingdom are not mushrooms. And so when you put, let's say, baker's yeast in your bread that you're making, that's fungi. When you put brewer's yeast in the beer that you're making, that's fungi. There's tons of, there's fungi in soy sauce in the form of a mold called Aspergillus oryzae. So anyway, the point is there's lots of different fungi out there that are not mushrooms at all. And so this is not mushroom, it is microbial fungi. And I think the texture is frankly way more like meat than like mushrooms. It's really up to the beholder whether it's identical to meat or not. And in my view, depending on the application, you can't really tell the difference. When you're eating a naked product like this, like no bun, no wrapper, no anything like that, you might think it's something different. But really important for us is that it is extraordinarily pleasurable to eat. Like that's the real key. And I think about foods that people haven't eaten before, like novel foods. And just take as one example cheese, right? Now, of course, vegans don't consume animal-based cheese, but vegans often enjoy eating these cashew-based cheeses and so on. And let's ask ourselves, like, how long have humans been eating cheese? Very little time, right? Like, think about all the things that had to happen for people to get cheese. You had to domesticate cows, which only happened recently in humanity's timeline. Then, after taking the milk, you've got to figure out how to make it curdle. And the only way to do that was by storing it in a calf's intestine where there was naturally rennet in there, which made the milk curdle. And then it takes centuries longer to develop things like Gouda and Brie and Swiss and cheddar and all the other things that people consider staples of their diets today. In other words, cheese is a novel food to humanity. It doesn't taste like something else, right? It's not like people ate cheese and they thought, oh, this tastes like X. They just thought, I love the taste of this. And now you go to the supermarket and cheese is a huge aisle in there, even though it's really a novel food for our species. Now, the same might be so for other types of cool culinary experiences like microbial fungi fermentation, where we're going to create foods that maybe they don't taste identical to anything else that people already enjoy eating, but maybe they're so good that people will be happy to eat them instead of other things that they are already eating. And so I do want to satiate the meat tooth, so to speak, for humanity, but I think that we can do it in ways that are both mimicry of meat, but also ways that are actually better than meat. And that's one of the reasons why we call our company The Better Meat Co., because we're making better meat. It's not just mimicry, it's actually better than animal-based meat.
Okay. Well, I love that you're supporting the Meat Too movement.
That's
Yeah.
funny. That's funny. No, that's funny. So, and when I look at, let's say, other cool culinary experiences that you might have, I wonder about what might be possible with this type of technology. So think about this, Chef AJ. Right now you might have on your kitchen counter a bread maker or an ice cream maker, and nobody bats an eye when they come over to your house, right? They see a bread maker on the counter and think, oh, that's nice. What if you had a meat maker? What if you could get, for example, spores in a little tea bag that you order, and then you could drop them in, and then the next day come back and you have freshly brewed meat right there on your kitchen counter, no animals involved. Wouldn't that be cool? Or what if, for example, you could go to your local restaurant and just like they might be brewing their own IPA in the back, maybe they're brewing their own local artisanal meat for your dinner right there that night. Wouldn't that be amazing that you could have these type of meat experiences? Or if you go even further and think about the fact that if humans ever do leave Earth and go for long distance cosmic voyages, not just to the International Space Station where we're regularly ferrying resources up there, but where you might actually have people going far into space, like Mars and so on. If those people want to eat meat, they're not going to be bringing Noah's Ark in tow, right? They're going to have to grow meat some way if they want to eat meat. And what better way to do it than with microbial fermentation? That is an extremely efficient way to satiate the meat tooth without having to bring cows to Mars.
Oh boy. Julie wants to know, is microbe fungi simply mycelium?
Yes, Julie, that's a great way to put it. So mycelium, which is the root-like structure of fungi, is another way to talk about this. And so most people don't know the word mycelium, and so I often don't use it because of that. Most people do know microbe or fungi. But yes, mycelium is the root-like structure of fungi. And there are some, you can get mycelium from mushroom species, and you can also get mycelium from non-mushroom fungi. As an example, I mentioned Aspergillus oryzae, which is a mold that is used in soy sauce and sake, and that's mycelium, right? So it's not the roots of a mushroom, it is the root of a particular species of fungi. And so, yes, this is a steak that I was just showing. This steak is a mycelium-based steak, and I'll tell you, Julie, it is phenomenal.
So many people, even if they don't personally like meat anymore themselves, are wishing they could buy this for their pets.
Yeah, that's a great point. Dogs and cats are massive meat consumers. In fact, one of the big reasons why meat demand has grown so much in the United States is because there's a big increase in the number of pets who are being held in households, right? And I have a dog. He doesn't really like eating plant-based, so I love that I can feed him this. So the reality is that not only are there a lot more dogs and cats in American households, nearly all of whom are eating meat. But there's been a shift away from using meat that maybe would have been like the discards of the slaughterhouse to using human grade meat now. And so that means that even more animals are raised for food. And so, of course, I absolutely love my dog. He's like my best friend. If you looked at a pie chart of happiness in my life, he is a huge portion of that happiness quotient in my life for sure. And I, don't tell my wife, but she might rival. He might rival her in terms of my happiness. But I will tell you, there is a trade-off here, which is lots of chickens, turkeys, pigs, and cows and fish who are being raised for those pets, obviously.
Well, speaking of your wife, can we say who she is? She's a well-known celebrity in the plant-based world in her own right.
Indeed, I live in my wife's shadow. She is I often go to plant-based events and I'm only known as Tony's husband. They don't know anything about me. So her name is Tony Okamoto. She runs a brand called Plant Based on a Budget. She has published 4 different cookbooks, and she also is a big Chef AJ fan. We're a big Chef AJ household, I guess. But I have had several times where we go to a vegan restaurant and somebody comes up to me and they give me their phone and they say, "Would you mind taking a photo of Tony with me?" So I'm the guy who stands there and just takes the photo. So I definitely live in her shadow, and I'm grateful to have been partnered with somebody who shares the same mission and values that I have to try to make the world a kinder place for animals.
Well, she's also a movie star, gorgeous. I'm curious, how did you guys meet? Were you both vegan at the time?
We were. I'll tell you, it's a funny and kind of embarrassing to me story, so I'll confess it to you. So don't tell anybody, Chef AJ, but here's what happened. I was at a plant-based conference in Washington, D.C. in 2015, and I saw her, and you mentioned that she is gorgeous. That I have to say that was my first thought as well. And so I walked over to talk with her, and I said, "Hi, I'm Paul," and she said, "We've actually met before." And I thought, "Oh man, I'm really digging a grave." And I thought, maybe I could be forgiven, like it was like a brief introduction. And I said, "Oh, can you remind me where?" And she goes, "Oh, we met at a concert 3 years ago." And I said, "Oh, to be honest, I don't remember this. And I'm sorry, but maybe, we talked only for a short time." And she goes, "No, we talked for like 15 minutes." And I thought, "Oh, man." So then she says, "Oh, and I Facebook friend requested you and you ignored it." And I thought, "Oh, my grave is dug. There's no point in continuing this conversation." But I pulled out my phone and I Facebook friend requested her to rectify that injustice right on the spot. And then we were talking a little bit later that same day, and we were talking about long distance running because at that time she was training for a marathon. And I had run a marathon only recently back then. And I was pulling back from long distance running because I told her, I said, I think it's kind of hard to build up muscle doing this. Like you're burning too many calories. And she said, "Oh no, you can build muscle." And she lifted up her dress to reveal her calf. And she goes, "Here, feel my calf and you feel how muscular it is." So, here I was, thinking my grave was dug. And she's saying, "Feel my calf" on the first time I'm talking to her just at a conference. And so I obliged her request. I felt her calf, and then next thing you know, we're married. So, so we've been married now for more than 5 years. We didn't actually become a couple in 2015. We did become a couple in 2017, and then we got married in 2019.
That's wonderful. I love that. I'm glad I asked. So a lot of people you were talking about corn said they liked the corn chicken, but if people are vegan, it always have egg whites?
No, there are many corn SKUs or corn products that do not have egg whites. So most of them do. That is true. But the company has been working to remove egg whites from a lot of their products. So they have my favorite one of their products is the spicy chicken patties, and they are totally vegan. And it says vegan right on the front of the package, actually.
Nice, nice. Mona says, when will you sell nationwide?
Mona, you just got to find us a couple of tens of millions of dollars, and we're going to build that factory of our dreams. Our goal is to deliver nationwide and, in fact, internationally this type of mycoprotein so that anyone who wants to enjoy delicious whole food alternative meat can do so. We need to first raise the capital, Mona, and then we will be creating a river of our mycoprotein through the food industry. There's nothing more important in my life than doing that. And so I can assure you, Mona, we're working on it.
Well, you've done a bunch of TED Talks, five, I believe. I watched all of them. Has that helped get you some exposure and maybe get some financing?
Yeah, I think that those are quite useful. Many of them have, six-figure views, like hundreds of thousands of views, and I think that's certainly helpful. Probably nothing is as helpful as going on Chef AJ's channel, so we'll see how that goes. But I'll tell you, we are working hard on this right now, and we've already in the last 6 years raised a good amount of capital to come as far as we've come. This isn't easy what we're doing, right? We're really harnessing the fermentation technology to create a new crop in the world. This is not like just, buying ingredients off the shelf and combining them. We are literally creating a new crop that has not been commercially farmed before. And that takes time and money, and we're working on it.
Well, I mean, I wish you every success. Have you ever done like crowdfunding or Indiegogo or anything like that?
We have raised tens of millions of dollars in the past, so we've done, we've done pretty well in the capital raising markets. What's happened in the last couple of years is that, honestly, the markets have dried up with high interest rates and other problems that have plagued the food technology industry. And so there's less capital flowing through this industry than in the past. But what that means is that it's a very investor-friendly market, and that investors can get really good deals on companies that were more company-friendly. Like in 2021, the deals you saw in this space were very company-friendly, meaning high valuations and so on. Now it's lower valuations, so it's lower stock prices, meaning that you can, get stock in these companies like the Better Miko for a lot cheaper than you could have at that time.
So you showed us what looked like a steak. Do you make other types of what looks like meat, like chicken and fish and
Oh, yeah.
pork, and bacon and ham?
Absolutely. So just in the same way that you can, let's say, use, I don't know, take peas as an example. You can use pea protein to make a hamburger or a sausage or a meatball or a chicken breast and so on. The same is so with us. You can use our mycoprotein to create all types of food. We make everything from chicken to steak to meatballs to tacos to turkey slices to even foie gras. Like you can go to French restaurants in Northern California and get foie gras made from our mycelium. So that is, it's a truly versatile superfood where you can create all of these different types of applications from this one key ingredient. And what we envision is not that we are going to be the people in the end who are making steaks and foie gras and chicken and selling it. We don't want to be a competitor to companies, let's say, like Beyond Meat or so on. What we want to do is be an ingredients company where we can sell this mycoprotein to other food companies for them to make their own products and make really stellar products from it. And that includes, of course, all the things that I mentioned, but maybe things that we haven't even dreamt of, maybe new foods that they're going to make that are just simply delicious. So we'll see. But in the same way that, you think about, like, let's say a company like Cargill, you don't see Cargill products on the shelf. You go to the supermarket, you're not going to see Cargill's brand on the front of a package. But chances are pretty high that a lot of the products that you buy do have Cargill ingredients in them. They're the ones who are selling that pea protein or that soy protein or that wheat protein. And the same is so with us. You won't see the Better Miko on the shelf, but you will see ingredients that contain our mycelium in it, and they are going to taste awesome.
Wow. Are there people that would rather not see you succeed, like the cattle industry, for example?
Oh, sure, of course. I mean, you see right now, the cattle industry is lobbying to do all types of things to try to defeat the alternative protein movement. In just the last couple of weeks, Florida and Alabama have banned selling cultivated meat, not restricted it with labeling or anything else like they've been trying to do to the soy milk companies where they don't want them to call it milk, right? They want to call them like soy juice or soy drink or something like that, which is kind of crazy. But in Florida and Alabama, they just made it a crime to sell cultivated meat. Now, in Tennessee, they have a bill that would do something similar, except in that case, they want it to be a $1 million fine to sell cultivated meat in Tennessee. Now, keep in mind, in Tennessee, if you are convicted of armed robbery, the worst fine you can get is $50,000. But they want to make it $1 million of a fine if you merely sell slaughter-free meat in Tennessee. And so these are all efforts to try to suppress innovation and entrepreneurialism. What they want to do is deny consumers the choice to choose animal-free meats. And that's because they want to protect the cattle industry. And they're trying to throw red meat, pun intended, to their political base, which views this as a culture war issue. But it isn't. Many people care about animals, whether they're on the right or the left. Many people want to be healthy, whether they're on the right or the left. And animal-free meats are better for us than the animal-based meats, and they're going to get even better and better. And so, as a reaction to this, I think you're going to see some states that are trying to incentivize it more, and we see places in Asia really incentivizing it. Like if you look, for example, at the last 10 years or so, Asia has come to dominate the solar panel market, the wind turbine market, semiconductors, and so on, while we in the US did not invest and we've fallen behind. This is why you're now seeing tens of billions of dollars of taxpayer money being spent to try to onshore semiconductor manufacturing, solar panel manufacturing, and so on through the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. Well, if the US had just invested in these technologies before, we wouldn't be so far behind. I mean, my wife and I put up solar panels on our house. Clearly, they are from China because that's where nearly all the solar panels are made. We don't want the same thing to happen with clean proteins, where Asia dominates the market for clean proteins and the US is left behind. And when you see states like Florida and Alabama not only not incentivizing clean protein production, but actually criminalizing it, you see how they're basically waving a white flag of surrender to other parts of the world that may come to dominate the future of protein.
So this is, I mean, I really want you to succeed and I want you to do it soon in my lifetime. I have some questions from some Instagram viewers, and one of them, they would like to know, what is the waste of making a product like this and how is it processed?
Oh, sure. Basically water. So, we run a fermentation, which means that it looks kind of like a craft brewery. So if you imagine a craft brewery, right, where you've got these stainless steel vessels where the fermentation is running and you're creating the alcohol that you want. In that case, their waste is the spent brewery grains, right? So all the grain that they're fermenting in there gets tossed often to cattle landfills, or it goes to like cattle feedlots or landfills. In our case, there's not a solid waste that comes out of it like that. In our case, we're essentially taking the water that we grew the microbes in and then getting rid of it. The real holy grail for us would be to figure out how we could recycle that water back into the system and use the same water over and over again. Now, keep in mind, this is still way less water use than growing cattle, for example, but it is the type of thing where we could be even better by figuring out a way to reclaim that water. And so that's the waste is essentially water that just gets flushed, but we're really working hard to figure out the pathway to reclaiming it.
I think Becky joined late because she says, what's the name of the fake meat company? And can we get it in the UK? It's not really fake meat.
Yeah, so Becky, the company in the UK that we're talking about is called Corns, Quorn, and my company is called The Better Meat Co. And I agree, it's not so much fake meat as much as your cell phone is not a fake landline, right? It's not, no, you're not going to pull out your fake landline and say, oh yeah, this is my mimicry of a landline phone. It's better than a landline phone, right? You still might call it your phone, but it's way better than a landline phone. And the reason we're the Better Meat Co. is because we are making meat that is way better than the meat that is made by slaughtering animals.
Yeah. So Dixie, hi Dixie, she's watching live, says, has Congressman Amy Barra toured your business?
Um, so you're talking about Ami Bera, I believe, the
Ami,
Congress.
sorry, it's spelled AMI, Ami
Yeah.
Barra. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, thank you. Yeah. So, Congressman Ami Bera has been to the Better Meat Co. He's a wonderful champion for the alternative protein industry, and he has publicly spoken about the good work that we are doing here at the Better Meat Co. So, for those who aren't familiar with Congressman Bera, he is a Northern Californian congressman who has been a great champion for us and for other alternative protein companies.
Have you ever thought of making a documentary?
Actually, there's a really cool YouTube channel called Plant Choppers, and it's run by a guy named Chris McCaskill.
I know he came to my house and he interviewed me. He's wonderful.
He is wonderful, as is his wife Tony.
Yep.
And I always have an affinity for people married to women named Tony. Um, so he actually did a really cool, maybe like a 20 minutes or so documentary about the work of the Better Meat Co. So if you go to the Plant Choppers channel on YouTube, you can check that out and you can see it's a lot of fun. Just look up like Plant Choppers,
Yep.
Better Meat Co. and you'll see it.
I will find that link and I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay.
Clark would like to know, how can we invest in your company? I am so excited for this to be successful internationally.
Clark, you're speaking my language, my friend. Please get in touch with me. Our website is bettermeat.co. Again, that's bettermeat.co. And just send me a message through there and I will hit you back. But we would welcome you to own a piece of this company.
Nice. I just want to change gears for a minute, just because every guest on Chef AJ Live gets this question, and you're no exception, especially because you're basically married to a vegan chef. But people really would love to know what you eat in a day.
I have a diet that is definitely different from most people. So I will give you an example of this, Chef AJ. We had a white elephant at my workplace at the Better Meat Co. where everybody had to give, a gift, right? It's like it's not Secret Santa. You're giving a gift and you know who is getting it. And my colleague gave me the best gift that I could ever imagine getting, which was just one microwaved sweet potato. And so I eat a lot of sweet potatoes, both the orange and purple kind. I love the purple sweet potatoes. And I eat them like apples. And so what I'll do is I'll microwave them and then put them in like a tin foil or an aluminum wrap and then let them get down to like room temperature. And so I'll do that like in the morning when I leave for work. And then, a few hours later as a snack, I'll just eat it like an apple. You don't have to put anything on it. It's just so delicious. And so I eat a lot of sweet potatoes. I also eat a good amount of mycelium, as you can imagine, given my profession, in a variety of ways. But one of the things that I do, and actually Tony taught me this, is for meal prepping, I don't prep whole meals. What I do is at the beginning of the week, I will make a bunch of, let's say, brown rice or quinoa or some other grain, and then I freeze it in cubes. So there's like these big cubes, like this big. And then I'll put them in a Ziploc bag so that they're just in there. Then I'll make a bunch of lentils or maybe beans, and I'll do the same thing, freeze them in cubes and put them in there. So then you'll have several Ziploc bags with these basics that you want, right? So the staples, lentils, quinoa, brown rice. And what I'll do is the night before I'm going to work, I will take a few of those cubes and match them together. So let's say brown rice with green French lentils and then some frozen vegetables, right? And I'll put them in the plasticware. And so by the morning, they are at room temperature or refrigerator temperature. And then I just put sauce on them. Usually hot sauce. I love hot foods, so I'll put hot sauce and maybe sprinkle some spices and herbs on them and mix them up, and that's the meal. So you don't have to really cook anything other than what you've originally made. So I love the cubes for frozen stuff, and I just mix and mash them throughout the week.
That's so cool. Do you have time to exercise in your busy day as a CEO?
I do exercise. So in addition to walking my dog Eddie, who is a joy to walk because he brings so much joy to the world, and he's popular himself. He has his own Instagram channel called Eddie the Pity, which is EDDIE the Pity. You can see if you want to enjoy life more, you can watch him on Instagram. People love him. But I also like to both run and lift weights. So my basic regimen is the following: one day I run. The next day I lift. One day I run. The next day I lift. There's nothing that complex about it. It's like just like religion to me. It's like I go in, I do it. There's no question about it. I'm going to run. I'm going to lift. I'm going to run. I'm going to lift. And that just is every other day.
Well, since Eddie has his own channel, maybe he could be the next one in the family on Chef AJ Live, because Tony's been on and you've been on. So it only makes sense to have the whole family come on.
Well, Chef AJ, we would love for you to come have dinner at our house, and at least you can meet Eddie, and you can tell people that you've experienced the joy that is this dog.
Well, he's beautiful, and I mean, I love all pets, but I love his color because my dog is gray. There's something that's just so nice about gray, you know?
Yeah, yeah, he was a foster for us. Tony and I have fostered a whole bunch of pit bulls, and he's the only one we ever kept. He was too friendly. We just could not let him go.
So Mary says, is your product considered processed food or is it whole food, plant-based?
This is a whole food. So if you think about many foods where you've gotten the fiber that has been stripped out, or you've stripped out some other component of it that makes it processed, this is whole. In fact, I would say it's even more whole than a typical whole food because if you think about a pea, you're going to eat the pea, right? But you're not eating the rest of the plant, right? You're not eating the leaves or the roots or the branches of the pea plant, right? In our case, you're eating the entire biomass that is produced here. So it's like the equivalent of eating everything, the leaves, the roots, the shoots, everything. And so this is, I would suggest, even more whole than what you would typically consider a whole food.
Right. Rebecca and a few others are wondering, what is the sodium content of a product like this?
There's very little sodium in the basic raw mycoprotein that we grow. Now, a lot of the times, people don't like sodium-free foods. They don't think they taste that good. So oftentimes what people do when they use it is they'll add salt to it, right? In the same way that people salt their food before eating it and so on. I try at least to be a low sodium consumer, so I don't add salt to my food like that. But people will salt to their own taste. But in the native mycoprotein, very low.
Yeah, nice. Okay. Oh, I was going to ask you something and forget what it was. Oh, I know. So what are the restaurants? Because obviously, if it's only in Sacramento, well, people can certainly travel, but which restaurants are serving this product right now?
I'll tell you my favorite one. So if you want to go to Buddha Belly Burger, which is an entirely plant-based restaurant in Sacramento, beautiful ambiance, delicious food, and a great owner who is really mission aligned, very animal friendly, vegan himself. And you can get numerous dishes on their menu with Better Meat Co. mycoprotein. You can get carne asada, you can get steak, you can get steak salad, and so on. And so Buddha Belly Burger, I recommend it not just because they carry Better Miko products, but also because it's just a really great restaurant.
Nice. I will definitely check that out. Have you ever thought about, sharing this with some of the other talented chefs? Like, are you familiar with Chef John from Faux Fresh and from Faux Fresh and Vegan Fresh to You? Because he's won a lot of the awards out here for chefs.
I'm embarrassed to say I don't know Chef John, but I would love to. We actually had a whole group of local restaurant chefs and restaurateurs in our office just last week who were here touring and tasting, and we got to get Chef John here. I'd love to show
Yeah,
him.
because I love all the vegan chefs here. And of course, there's, Angelique from Zest, but he's especially interested in, I think he would be especially interested in using a product like this because
I'd love to talk with him. Let's make it happen.
yeah, he's wonderful. He just opened a second restaurant. So yeah, somebody's asking if you can say what all the ingredients are in this product, or is there a way to look at the nutritional label of the product?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, just message us via bettermeat.co and we'll send you the exact nutritional label at the same time. So first of all, the mycoprotein itself is a single ingredient. What we grow, the only ingredient is mycoprotein. But when you make a steak with it, right? So you make this type of a steak, what you're going to add to the mycoprotein. The overwhelming majority of the product is the mycoprotein. But yes, we're going to add beet juice to make it red so it looks like a steak. We're going to add some plant fibers to it and some fava bean to it for basically textural purposes. And then we add some avocado oil as well in order to give it a little bit of a fattier texture than the mycoprotein on its own has, because most people want that in a steak. So that's the basic gist of how we make this product. It's basically mycoprotein plus some plant-based fats, flavors, and fibers that go into it. And it's delicious. It is really excellent. But if you want the exact nutritional profile with all the numbers of fat and calories and so on, just message us and we'll email it to you.
Nice. It's a product gluten-free.
It is. Everything we do is common allergen free. So we do not use any soy or gluten or other foods that are common allergens. And so personally, I like eating gluten myself. I like eating soybeans myself. But I know there's a lot of people out there who don't want one or both of those. And so we do not use any common allergens in any of our products for that.
That's amazing. So like, what do you do all day? Because I don't mean it like that, but
Yeah.
w-
Well,
and
you
how
know,
can we help you? How can we help you get your dream to be a mycoprotein on every plate?
I like that. It's like, Herbert Hoover in the 30s campaigned on a chicken in every pot on Sunday, and we're going to campaign for mycoprotein on every plate. I love that. So first of all, to answer your question, Chef AJ, as the CEO of the Better Miko, there's a lot of things that I get the privilege and honor of being able to do. One of which is being able to enable and empower the work of the 24 people who work here. These are people who are devoting their lives to fermentation science, food science, and so on. And, so that includes, obviously the basic mechanics of running a company, which is everything from finance to fundraising and so on. to making sure that we are doing what we need to with our customers, with our investors, and going out and ensuring that the world knows what a promising technology this is. Obviously, any startup would always love to have more business, but the biggest problem for us is not customers, although we'd always welcome more customers. The biggest problem is not demand. The demand is there for our product. It's the supply that is extraordinarily limited, and it's only limited because of lack of access to capital. And so we need to raise the capital necessary to build a full-scale fermentation factory. And when we do that, that will unleash the power of this mycoprotein to finally be on everybody's plates.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, like I said, I really genuinely wish you every success, because the whole reason I became vegan 50 years ago was because I wanted to reduce animal suffering. And now
Amazing.
there's even more reasons. We find out it's better for human health. It's better for the environment. So to me, it's a no-brainer. And
Yeah.
isn't there just one really, really rich philanthropist or celebrity that you could just send the product to and they'll just give you all the money you need?
I hope that person is listening right now, AJ. And if you are, get in touch via bettermeat.co.
Oh man. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the book. And I normally I would have read it in preparation for the interview. I heard it was wonderful. So who is this book for? And tell us a little bit about it. And it is available on Audible, right? And did you do the Audible yourself?
I did not do the Audible myself. George Newbern, who's a famous actor on the show Scandal, did the Audible version of it. But the book is called Clean Meat: How Growing Meat Without Animals Will Revolutionize Dinner in the World. And the book tells the stories of the entrepreneurs, the investors, the scientists who are all racing to commercialize the world's first slaughter-free meat. That work is chronicled in the book, telling the motivations and the backstories of why these people are doing it, right? And so this is a book that is not heavy on science or technology. It's more like a pop business or a pop science book where you get to enjoy the experience of these people who are devoting their lives to trying to recreate the meat experience without animals, many of whom are animal advocates who left nonprofit animal advocacy or environmental advocacy to start their own companies and try to make a difference here. And so these are people who really do believe that we are able to not only recreate the meat experience, but to do it in a way where people can make money doing it. And frankly, that's the only way this is actually going to work. For too long, the profitable thing has been to exploit animals. Well, what if it could be more profitable not to exploit animals? Wouldn't that be amazing?
Absolutely. And you're what I call a real entrepreneur. You have your fingers in a lot of plant-based pies. You also have a podcast. Tell us what the podcast is and where people can listen to it as well.
That's very generous of you, Chef AJ. So yes, I do wear a good number of hats in my spare time. I also host a podcast that's called the Business for Good podcast, and I interview people who are making money by making the world a better place. And so I'll interview entrepreneurs who are working to, let's say, make animal-free meat, or to do fossil fuel-free energy, or they're working to find ways to deal with nuclear waste. There's a lot of food-related episodes, though. People listening right now might be most interested in those. But if you go to the website, businessforgoodpodcast.com, you can look and see there's more than 140 back episodes. They are all evergreen, and many of them are extraordinarily inspirational stories. It's kind of like if you've ever listened to How I Built This by NPR, it's kind of like How I Built This, except only companies that are actually socially oriented, trying to solve some critical social problem.
Is it available everywhere that fine podcasts are listened to?
Everywhere you can get podcasts, you can listen to the Business for Good podcast.
Nice. Not that you should show favoritism, but what was one of your most memorable episodes?
Really interestingly, we had on not an entrepreneur, but an investor, a gentleman named Steve Jurvetson, who is a billionaire venture capitalist who made bets on many of the many tech companies that made him a billionaire. So he made early bets in Hotmail and Skype and Tesla and SpaceX. And he's on the board of directors of SpaceX. And, this is a guy who, did not come from great wealth, but amassed great wealth by picking companies. And now he has started his own venture capital firm called Future Ventures, where he is betting on companies that have to have some type of mission that relates to making a better future. So instead of just betting on tech companies that are agnostic about making the world a better place, he's only investing in companies that he believes not only will be really profitable, but also are doing something really important for the world, including making investments in alternative meat companies. like the Better Me Co. actually. So that was one of the most popular episodes ever that we've done on the show. And I believe it was actually episode number 100. So it'd be easy for you to go find if you're looking for that one.
How often do you do an episode, and what day does it drop, a particular day of the week?
The 1st and 15th of every month.
Nice. Has Tony ever been on?
In fact, Tony has been on not once, but twice, one of the only people to ever repeat on the Business for Good podcast. So she runs a very successful business called Plant Based on a Budget. She employs a good number of people doing that. And she talks about the business of being an influencer. If you had asked me, Chef AJ, let's say 5 years ago, if somebody, what does it like to be an influencer? I would have thought, well, it means you probably don't make money and you have some other source of money. And the reality, of course, is that is not true. There's many influencers who make a good living helping to, in this case, promote animal-free eating. And so that's wonderful. What a fantastic world to live in where promoting kindness to animals can actually make people money. I mean, that's amazing. And so Tony has been on to talk about the business of how influencers actually make money doing what they're doing.
Nice. Is there anybody that you're striving to get on that hasn't been on yet?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm very excited because there is the next upcoming episode, actually. We'll have on somebody who I wanted to have on, but hasn't come on yet until now, which is Bruce Friedrich, the founder of the Good Food Institute, a nonprofit organization that I think extremely highly of and that does a lot of really great things. And so I'm excited that Bruce is on. We've already taped it, but it's going to air this week. And so check out businessforgoodpodcast.com to find that episode when it drops. But yes, there are other people who I would really love to have on, including, for example, the CEO of Chipotle, who is just launching his own vegan restaurant chain called Kernel now. Isn't that interesting that the CEO of Chipotle is creating a vegan restaurant chain? So I'd love to talk to him about that. We'll see if that becomes
Now,
possible.
you said Colonel, but is it Colonel Kernel or Colonel like Colonel Sanders?
No, I think it's Kernel. And let me make sure I'm even getting it right. I think yes, it's called Kernel, Kernel. That's right.
Nice. Well, a lot of people would love to do a TED Talk. You did 5. How were you able to get so many of those? That's pretty impressive, actually.
That's very generous of you. So I did apply to the TEDx, to some of the TEDx conferences, and then at other times I've been invited unsolicited. And so once you do some, if it goes well and they get views, then other TEDx conferences want you because they think they're going to get a lot of views from it. And I'm grateful that mine have, like some of mine have gotten 250,000 views or so. But I'd really love to see them getting millions of views, and hopefully one day that will be the case.
Judith would like to know if your product is organic.
Hey Judith, we don't use any pesticides or anything like that, but we're not part of the National Organic Program, so we don't have any certifications like that. But we run a completely indoor agriculture process, right? So there's no additives like fertilizers or pesticides or anything like that.
It's not like mycelium has been genetically modified or anything.
And no, this is an all natural microbe, no modification.
Absolutely. So Rebecca says, have you looked at MainVest, where little folks are able to invest in companies they like?
Thanks, Rebecca. I'll check that out. I don't know about MainVest, but I will check that out. Thank you.
Cool. And Laura says, has NPR invited you on to discuss this product and why it's urgent?
Yeah, I was actually on NPR's All Things Considered just about 2 weeks ago and talking about alternative meats there. So that was fun. I was really honored to do that, and I would love to go back on again. So maybe since I was on All Things Considered, maybe I'll do Morning Edition next. We'll see.
Nice. What did you do before this?
Well, I spent most of my life as a lobbyist for animals. So I first founded an organization called Compassion Over Killing, which is now called Animal Outlook.
You mean cock?
Yes, COK is what we called it, but yes.
Okay.
Um,
I remember that. I just didn't know that was you.
yeah, so I founded that organization and worked there for about a decade. And we did a number of things like undercover investigations and posing as employees at slaughterhouses and factory farms and so on to try to raise awareness about what happened to animals. After that, I became a lobbyist for animals, and I worked to try to pass a number of laws. I was very proud to be a part of many of the ballot initiatives that were seeking to get better conditions for animals who are used for food. And then, as I mentioned, about 10 years ago or so, I started really getting nervous that maybe food technology and food innovation were going to do more than the public policy work that I was doing. And as a result, I decided to write a book, and then that led to starting a company.
That's amazing. Like, have you ever thought of partnering with companies that produce meat so they'll have an alternative line?
Yeah, actually, interestingly enough, Johnsonville Sausage is one of our bigger investors. And so we've partnered with other companies like Purdue Farms as well on certain things. I'm a big believer that we need to change the meat companies themselves. It's not going to be a lot easier if we can change the meat companies than try to displace them. And so if you think, for example, let's say in the photography wars, you had Kodak and you had Canon who were vying for supremacy in the photography world back in the 1990s. And they both knew about digital photography, but Kodak was concerned that it was going to cannibalize its core business, right? Think dark rooms, negatives, print chemicals, and all that. Canon also thought it would cannibalize its core business, but it decided to embrace it. And we all know what happened. When the digital revolution took place, Kodak went bankrupt and Canon became the largest manufacturer of digital cameras on the planet. So Canon didn't get displaced by a small startup. Canon actually became the digital camera industry. And so this company, which for decades had been print photography, now was digital photography. It's the same experience, right? You still get to capture your memories, what a photograph does, but way more efficiently. And that's what I think can happen with the animal meat industry today, that these companies can create the same experience of eating meat, but in a way that's way more efficient than having to raise and slaughter all of these animals. And so that's my ultimate goal, is to help the meat companies today transition away from their use of animals and move toward animal-free methods of protein production. Wouldn't that be amazing if the companies that were so adroit at exploiting animals today became really adroit at selling mycoprotein?
So I'm curious, you call it the Better Meat Company. Has there been any pushback or even litigation? Because you know how like the dairy industry didn't like that they were calling, alternative milks milk, and I guess they
Right.
had to change that. So is there any problem with you calling it meat?
That's never been a problem for us. Presumably, if we become more effective and bigger, then we will get more pushback. But so far, we have not faced that problem.
Great. Well, when you have it, that you'll be big enough to handle it, I'm sure.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hope so.
So Linda says, so how did you come up with this idea?
Linda, I wish that I could say like I was so smart that I'm the one who came up with it, but honestly, corn, Quorn in the UK was the real inspiration for me. I knew that they could do microbial fungi fermentation to create mycoprotein-based products, but those products, while I like corn and I eat corn, the problem is they're not really that meat-like, and it's only one species. And I wondered maybe there are other microbial fungi that we could grow that would be faster growing, more meat-like in their texture, higher protein, and so on. And so we screened a bunch of types of fungi and settled on some really great workhorse species that make wonderful products. And so imagine if you lived in a world where, I don't know, let's say, people only ate uh, pigs, right? Nobody ate chickens or fish or turkeys or cows. And then somebody comes up with a way to say, well, actually, there's this other species you can also eat, right? Well, the same is so with microbes. Like, they're making corn makes this product from this one microbe, which is really cool, but there's lots of other microbes that you can utilize also. And so why not use those too and figure out what they can do? And, just like different plants have different textures and tastes and nutritional profiles, different animals have different tastes, textures, and nutritional profiles, different microbes have different textures, tastes, and nutritional profiles. And so that's what our goal is to become a microbial company that creates really delicious products that are high in protein and that create wonderful culinary experiences.
Nice. Judith would like to know, is your method patented?
Yes, Judith, the Better Meat Co. has been granted a number of patents on our processes, with numerous other patents still pending, but four patents granted so far.
Nice. And then there's a question from Jackie. Is Meaty a competitor? I've had Meaty made from mushroom and it's delicious.
I'm glad that you like it, Jackie. So I would consider them, they're what's called a CPG brand, which is a consumer packaged good brand. So we are a B2B ingredients company, business to business. So I would view them as a potential customer, not as a potential competitor. Their product is made from microbial fungi. It's not made from mushrooms, even though it's labeled as coming from mushrooms. It's not actually mushrooms. It's made from microbes. And I'm wishing them well.
Thank you. And somebody's asking, Julie wants to know, I don't know who this person is, but have you contacted Paul Stamets?
I love Paul Stamets, Julie, so thanks so much. For those of you who don't know, he's like the king of mycology. So this guy is like one of the key people in the world of the study of fungi. And I have talked to him about this, and I've invited him to our fermentation facility here in Sacramento. He's not been able to make it so far, but if you are really into mycology, his book, Mycelium Running, is a great primer on all things fungi.
I think people are getting confused because you're like somebody saying, well, why not partner with Wicked Kitchen? They're the mushroom kings, but your product, it's not mushroom.
That's right. That's right. And so first of all, I love Wicked Kitchen. Awesome guys. I love Chad Sarno and his brother. Like, it's a great company. They use mushrooms, right? Mushrooms are awesome. They're great for you, but they don't have much protein. And oftentimes it's hard to make them cost effective. Mushrooms can be very expensive, and mushrooms generally don't have the same texture of meat. What we're doing are not mushrooms. We are growing microbial fungi, which are different from mushrooms, and have a really delectable texture and flavor and create a much higher protein content than mushrooms do.
So I'm curious, while your product would solve all the problems, like what to feed your pets and, environmental destruction and human health and animal suffering, what do you think about lab-grown meat?
I'm a fan, so I hope that it becomes commercially viable. Unfortunately, it's going to be a long time before that ever happens. So the United States has approved what is called cultivated meat or so-called lab-grown meat for human consumption, and I have eaten it a number of times. Unfortunately, this industry is not ready for commercialization. And so if you talk to these companies and ask them when they're going to be on grocery store shelves, they'll tell you not until the 2030s. And so this is not really something that people can get yet. It's not being sold anywhere on the planet right now. Literally, not 1 gram is being sold on the planet anywhere right now. And so my hope is that that technology will mature enough that it can become commercially viable, but that has not happened yet. So I view it though, kind of like clean energy. You think we need to make energy without fossil fuels. So you can do it through geothermal, through wind, through solar, a whole host of ways that you can do it. Well, we need to create meat without animals, and you can do that through a whole variety of ways: plant-based, microbial fungi, cultivated animal cells. Like, there's lots of different ways to try to peel this potato, so to speak. And I'm supporting any of them because I believe that the problem of animal agriculture is so severe that it requires innumerable alternatives. And so I hope it succeeds. Now, of course, if you're vegan, you may not want to eat it because it is actual animal meat, but it's not intended for vegans, right? It's intended for people who are going to McDonald's or Burger King and they have, can hopefully eat that rather than a burger that came from a slaughtered animal.
Right. I think the people that want it are because they have like a pet like a cat and they would feel more comfortable giving them that than.
I would be much more comfortable doing that. I mean, in this case, you can have actual animal meat without having to raise and slaughter animals. Who wouldn't prefer that to slaughter-based meat?
Well, who wouldn't prefer yours? But what's the problem? Why is there such a disconnect? It drives me crazy that people just don't see this as the great idea that it is, and just everybody wants to do it.
That's very nice of you. I agree. I am working hard every day, Chef AJ, to make sure that we can bring this to a full-scale commercialization.
Well, I was going to let you go, but Judith said, for those who don't care if they eat meat, could this be a supplement? What is the resistance to this product? Obviously, the cattle industry, but what is the resistance in the mind of the consumer is what I want to know.
I don't believe there is resistance in the mind of the consumer, to be honest with you. I think that the biggest problem for all of the alternative meats right now is that they're more expensive than animal-based meat. And so I'll give you an example. I was in Safeway last week and I was looking at the Beyond Burgers. It's $8.99 for 2 quarter-pound patties. So that means that it's $18 per pound for those Beyond Burgers, whereas conventional beef made from slaughtered cows is around $5 a pound. So, you're talking not like 30 or 40% more expensive, but really like 300 or 400% more expensive. So you got to really want it, right? For somebody to spend 400% more, they got to really want it. They need to be highly motivated by environmental or animal welfare or health reasons. And for most people, they might be willing to spend a little bit more for something they perceive as better for them or for the planet, but that's a lot more. And so, look, I'm rooting for Beyond Meat. I hope that their company succeeds. It's really important that they do. But that's, I think, a big big problem is in this space is that it's just still more expensive to make these products.
So that's always the bottom line, isn't it?
Sadly, I mean, look, you got to accept humans as we are, and price matters to us. When, even for people who can afford to pay 400% more, they don't always want to.
So we just need to find a way to make this, like you said, with all the other things that animals were used for that have gone by the wayside because they found a better and a cheaper way. May this be next.
Amen. Amen, Chef AJ.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It was so great having this conversation, Paul.
Chef AJ, thanks so much. If you want to get in touch with us, contact us at bettermeat.co. I'm grateful to be on the show. As I said, I'm a fan of yours. My wife is a fan of yours. We would love to get a chance to hang out again in person sometime. So hope we see each other soon, but thanks so much. And thanks to everybody for tuning in.
Thank you so much, Paul. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific time for Dr. Stefan Esser talking about